Welcome back to Pivot Points. I'm your host, Dave Allen, founder of Brand Pie, the brand consultancy working with businesses to deliver impact at pivotal moments in their journey. Kristi Henderson's career is a masterclass in empathy-driven leadership and the power of starting on the front line. She began as a bedside nurse in a trauma centre. Now she's become the CEO of Confluent Health, with the single-handed power to influence the law itself. Kristi's path is a testament to the idea that true innovation comes from understanding the people you serve, and the best leaders learn firsthand. If you're putting band-aids on your leadership style, then today's discussion might be the miracle cure you need. We'll cover how to embrace tech to solve real problems, strategies to lead with empathy, and why change goes at the speed of trust. Super excited to have you here today, Kristi, and thank you for agreeing to come on Pivot Points. Would you mind just giving a brief introduction? I know you've had a lot of pivotal moments in your life, so very excited to talk to you today.
Well, Dave, first, just thank you for having me. I love getting to do these podcasts to share a little bit about my journey, hopefully to help others as they're on their leadership journey. So I appreciate you having me here. Let me tell you a little bit about myself and what we can dive in and go wherever you want as we go on this journey together. So I started as a bedside nurse in an emergency department. It was a trauma center and the only level 1 trauma center for the state. And now I'm a CEO of a national musculoskeletal company. And so it's been a phenomenal journey where I've learned so much from so many people along the way. But there are, 4 kind of key areas where I would say I made a major pivot in my career journey and for my family as well. All of these decisions don't go in isolation. Others are impacted by the decision. And so I couldn't have done it without their support. But that's where it all started. It started when I was leading. I started as a bedside nurse and then had taken on advancing leadership positions to where I was then running the emergency department. And I was just always just baffled, honestly, by the real journey of real individuals trying to stay and get healthy while trying to live their life. And there's pressures from work where they can't get off time to get the healthcare and preventive services they need, all the way over to financial constraints. And so I just saw how broken the healthcare system was. And that is really the moment where I said, there's got to be a better way. And I've been on the journey ever since then, which we can talk through around trying to redesign the healthcare system so that it worked for people.
When you started off as a bedside nurse, did you ever think you'd end up as CEO of Confluent Health or a business of that sort of size?
No. And I think that some of that is the beauty of looking backwards. When you know where you're standing on the journey up a mountain, it might be too intimidating. But when you just go one step at a time and take on a new challenge, and I really approached each and every step as a fulfillment toward, okay, this isn't good enough. I can do more. Or how can I help more? And so it was not with the end in mind. It was a journey. And each step was a pivotal one that actually took me to here. So I had no idea that I would ever be the CEO of Confluent Health.
And that one step at a time, I mean, you must have had a drive to improve or to make things better. And every time you drove to the next step, you didn't hit a glass ceiling and you felt good. Because, I mean, you've come on probably an incredible journey over a relatively short period of time to go across that sort of span from bedside nurse to CEO. Is it the drive? Is it the desire to help people? What is it that really motivates you? And where do you think that motivation came from?
Yeah, so there is a restlessness that I have. And so I'm sure many others have it as well. And when you find something you love, it doesn't feel like work. And it truly is. I got to get up tomorrow because I got more work I need to do. I'm not there yet. And I still feel that way today. And so I've always been driven like that. But I do remember very pivotal moment when I was in the emergency department and I kept hearing the stories and there were workforce shortages in healthcare. And it was like, how are we going to fix this problem? People were waiting in the waiting room to be seen by a doctor for 8, 10, 12 plus hours at that time. It was a national crisis around emergency department overcrowding. And so people were traveling to get healthcare. I was like, this cannot be this way. And so at that point, I decided to go back to school and became a nurse practitioner, the first one in that emergency department, and then kind of had advancing positions to be able to really realize the full potential of that role. So new workforce in the healthcare system as a nurse practitioner, and took on a leadership role there. But every single move has been to solve a problem that the system wasn't solving or nobody was addressing. And so I would say that if I look across all of the different positions that I've held, every one of them was a newly created role that I had pitched to create and design, other than the CEO role that I have now, or the entry level position I had as a nurse. So there's something there that's pretty interesting around seeing a problem and advocating for a new role and convincing people that it was a problem worthy of being solved, enough so that they created a new position that I would take on.
I mean, did you find it a big change, and did you do it sort of with all that positivity when you went from being a practitioner to maybe becoming an operator, or did it just happen naturally?
No, I wish it was that easy. My gosh, I was terrified every step of the way. And maybe just something just personal about me that maybe many of the listeners don't know is that had a really significant phobia of public speaking and of any attention. So like I would, even as a child, my sister often spoke for me everywhere. If that tells anybody just the level of anxiety that came there. And I just got this determination. But for many years in my early positions, I can remember having hives and just flushing and tachycardic. It was almost an unhealthy level of anxiety. Some is good. But I self-regulated and learned to, like, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it. And if that person can do it, I can do it. And it was just that kind of determination. And so I just, again, one foot in front of the other. And some days I thought I'm not going to make it, but I did. And I had great mentors and people cheering me on. And it was interesting because it was oftentimes problems that I was asked to solve that no one else actually wanted to do. So they were like, yeah, you go for it. Go on out on that plank. So, it's easy looking back. In the middle of it, it was filled with doubt and challenges, but a double dose of determination on top of that.
Yeah, no, I can see you've got determination to a power of 10 here, and overcoming those sorts of things. I got a lot of empathy because I was exactly the same. I couldn't sort of present to save my life at school. I used to hate it, and anything to do with acting or anything like that. And then you join a company and they teach you how to do it, and you realize it's actually, you get over yourself. But when you went from the practitioner side to the operator side, and you started leading and managing and looking at the productivity or how to make things better from a management point of view, a leadership point of view, how did you deal with mobilizing people and getting people on your side and starting to get decisions through the system?
Yeah. So I think that maybe let me step back to kind of speak to those kind of 4 pivots that moved me from clinician to advancing kind of leadership and less clinical role, and the tactics at which I did it. Because one of the things that I can remember vividly too, practicing first as a clinician, which I was practicing as a nurse and nurse practitioner for 24 years before I made a really major pivot point and uprooted myself from the first health system. So I mean, people don't do that anymore. I stayed at the first job at the university for 24 years. I had various roles during that time, but still stayed there. But one of the things that I've just committed to myself, because I've been on the front lines myself, is that I would listen to the front lines and that I would make decisions that not only were good business decisions, but that I could look squarely in the eyes of my peers, of other clinicians, and know that I was not jeopardizing quality or wasn't asking them to do something that I wouldn't do ever also. And so I've stayed true to that today. And so the way that I lead and the way that I've transitioned between positions has always come back to getting on the road, going and meeting with people, watching and seeing how things operate when I make decisions. But I went from that academic medical center, and the reason I pivoted and left there was because I was limited in where I could provide services. I had to stay within the state in the US because it was a government state funded institution. So I couldn't extend the model that we had designed of using new workforces and technology to extend healthcare without moving and changing jobs. So I actually uprooted my family and we moved to Austin, Texas, so that I could then work for a health system that had a national footprint so that I could then replicate what I had built. And we didn't talk through that, but the solution for the problem and pain point that I was seeing in the ER of people not getting healthcare was to build what I will call a health distribution model that used technology to take healthcare to people through telehealth. And it was a lot of partnerships, but the academic medical center then distributed their expertise out into rural and underserved areas. And we used technology in the home and schools and workplaces as well. It was phenomenal. And I was like, this works so good. I have the responsibility. I really believed this. And maybe it was so naive, right? I had the responsibility to get up and stop thinking about myself and relocate my family, my husband, who was a partner in a law firm, and 3 daughters who were in middle school and high school, moved to Austin, Texas, because I owed it to the world to replicate it. I believe that. That's how powerful that program was. So I moved, did that. It worked in Texas. And then I started doing it for the corporate office of this national nonprofit health system. And it was all, again, focused on access to care, experience for patients and clinicians, and integrating technology and innovation in a way that actually was meaningful and not about the technology, but around real pain points and making things simpler and easier to get healthy. And then Amazon gets into healthcare. And I'm like, whoa, what could I do if I could use their distribution system where they can deliver a package to anybody in a day? What if I could be a part of that? And so I got so excited, went and took a job that I didn't know what it was because it was still stealth, but knew they were in healthcare, and pivoted to that. But in that same situation, I'm taking learnings from the front lines. I'm asking customers, what do you want? What do you need? What would you actually use? And building around feedback and the voice of the customer, which is both the clinical team and the patient. And so that has been a constant. I could go through the next 2 steps of my pivots and journey to show the same thing. But I think if we're not building things that get into the workflow of the clinical team to make it easier for them and the life flow, for a lack of better words, of humans, then you're going to get something that's just about a shiny object and not something that's going to be adopted. So I've held true to that, listening first and then acting and holding true to the 2 customers that I have.
I might be being overly simplistic here, but it sounds like you had an idea and you've made that idea your central driver, your passion, and you've made that idea bigger and real and then a greater reality. Am I being oversimplistic?
I mean, I think that there is this one big vision around healthcare has to be better. It has to be better, and it can be better. And so that's what it's all rooted in. The ways at which I get there is recognizing the complexity of the system. You've got to do policy and advocacy work. You've got to get the voice of the patient customer. You've got to understand the clinical, the payment model, all of these different things. And so each one of these positions that I took allowed me to get more experience around that whole sphere of complexity so that the next job I went into, I was better informed and able to do more, if that makes any sense. But I would say there is a drive, there is a focus, but a lot of different spheres and dimensions to get there.
Yeah. And how did you get to the CEO role? Talk to us a little bit about Confluent Health and what Confluent do, and then talk about how you got to the CEO role and then what was that like?
Yeah, well, so Confluent Health first is a national healthcare delivery organization that focuses on musculoskeletal health. And so we have over 800 clinics across the United States where we have clinicians who are physical therapists, occupational therapists, and speech and language pathologists, all focus on muscle and movement so that you can improve quality of life. Movement is life. So there's sports injuries that we take care of all the way over to post-surgical rehabilitation, which a lot of people think of rehab after a surgery, but it's also, after a stroke, being able to return to work or be able to do your activities of daily living, whatever it may be. But so we deliver healthcare in the community, in clinics, to focus all on musculoskeletal health. Now, that is the lion's share of the company. What we realized in this is that to really get people in the healthiest state of their musculoskeletal health, we needed to work upstream and prevent the injury in the first place. So we also work in employer work sites on injury prevention and safety. So think ergonomics and functional testing. If you're going to work in a warehouse, can you stand for 8 hours and lift 25 pounds all day? Are you fit to be able to do that job so you don't get injured? So we work from prevention all the way through rehab, through work sites, as well as in clinics and through partnerships with hospitals. And that's the spectrum of it. There's one other division that's worth me noting, that to be able to do that successfully, we actually have to hire a lot of clinicians or therapists in our business. And there's not enough of them graduating every year to be able to meet the demand. The demand is way exceeding the supply of our therapists. And so we partnered with universities and started an education division that helps to open accredited doctorate level graduate health science programs in physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language pathology, and now others, to help improve the pipeline of people graduating and interested in becoming a therapist in our company. And so it's a broad spectrum. It's those three main divisions, though, are our workplace division, our outpatient physical therapy clinics, and then our education division. So that's Confluent Health. So I came in here about 2.5 years to be their CEO. It was a pivotal moment for the company as well as for me. So the CEO and founder was transitioning out of the company and onto the board. And so I came in, I was the first non-founder CEO of the company, which was an exciting opportunity for me, but one that I didn't take lightly. This had been built over, at that time, 7-8 years, and I was coming in to continue to grow it. It was working really well. And so this was about taking it to the next level of growth. And so I was coming in from my previous job as the CEO of a company within United Health Group, which is a Fortune 5 company in the United States that is a health delivery organization as well as a health insurance company. And I worked with them running a multi-site business within that company. So this was, in that sense, similar, but it was a deep vertical in one segment of healthcare around musculoskeletal health. So the excitement about it was an incredible company that had a great infrastructure, amazingly motivated therapists across the country that were very driven, aligned mission. And then I was going to get to take all the learnings from all these different roles that I've had and bottle them up into this company. And so that was incredibly exciting for me. And that was a big pivot, working within a big corporate Fortune 5 company to this company and leading this organization.
And what did it feel like? Well, I mean, when you took on your first CEO role at United, did that feel different to the CEO role at Confluent?
The only difference I would say is that, United Health Group is a Fortune 5 company. And so the amount of resources and depth across that organization was very advanced, amazingly intelligent people through the whole company that had been there. And they've just had more time to mature the company and build out the infrastructure. So there was resources at the ready everywhere. And so some of it is just a self-motivation around taking on the ownership and responsibility as if it was my dollar that I was investing and my family that I was taking care of. And so I've kept that mentality in this role. So that's the same. I feel the same kind of pressure from the company that I did in any of my roles anywhere. And I think that's just innate in who I am. But it is different in that it is a newer, younger company. And we now have been in existence. We're heading into our 11th year. So we're a strong, big and growing company, but I just don't have the same number of resources that I had at a Fortune 5 company.
Yeah. And is the founder being a good mentor? I mean, I know as a founder myself that it's really hard to start to pull back and allow somebody else to run the show and give them the reins. And it's always sort of an interesting dynamic between a founder and first-time CEO in a founder-led business.
Yeah, I think that one of the things I've tried to think about as I was coming into this role is an amazing respect for what had been built
Yeah.
and the desire to learn and hear that at the same time listening to the therapist and the patients to say, now where do we go next, and how do I build on top of this amazing company that has been here? He's since now running another company, and so he's not involved today, but a huge respect for what was built and learning from him so that I could then think about, okay, so what's next, what honors that but also moves us to the next stage of the company. And so that's how I've approached that.
No, and I think that's really wise, because I've encountered situations where CEOs come in, the founder is still on the board, and they try and change everything too quick, and they don't listen.
Yeah, to that point, and excuse me for jumping in. I just because of one of the things that you heard me talk about is hearing from the front lines. Well, the first month I decided, okay, I've got to get on the road. So we have a headquarters in Louisville, Kentucky, but 90% or more of our employees are all over the country. And so if I'm going to really hear the voice of the customer, I need to get on the road and I need to go into the clinics. I've been a patient in the clinics. I've gone in and met with the therapist on the front line and got their feedback. And some of the greatest things that we've done since I've been here have been ideas that have come from the front lines. And so that has paid off consistently. And so I'm not going to lose that approach. And sometimes when you get on a plane and it's delayed another 2 hours or you get stuck wherever, you question it. But every single time it is worth every hour and every mile and every plane ride to have taken that step.
No, I mean, I think that's great advice for any CEO coming in a founder-based business. First of all, take time, listen, but get out there and talk to the people. Don't sit in meeting rooms strategizing and looking at spreadsheets. Talk to people. And do you think everything you've done in your previous roles enabled you to talk to people with more empathy and understanding?
100%. It's so funny. I think back to my first job. I remember saying, I'm not going to write a policy or make a decision unless I really know that it is solid and it's informed. And at that stage, I was still, young and trying to figure it all out. And still also wanting to be liked by everybody, which is impossible, as you know, in this role.
Mm.
But I would actually, when someone did great, I would go say, okay, you go home, you get the day off with pay. I'm going to do your job. And I would sit and I would do the unit secretary's role, the lab tech's role. I do every position in there and let people go. And then I'd feel the impact of what I actually had asked others to do as well. And so that paid off. But, there's actually words to this now. I didn't know it in the middle of it or as I was implementing and using this model. But, there's been articles written in Harvard Business Review, put out an article on my story from the first academic medical center where I was. And it was talking about reverse innovation. And that is taking the ideas from the front lines and then implementing it instead of from the boardroom and pushing down. And so the two have to actually work together. I may have insights that are setting a target or a goal around growth, whether that's financial or geographic presence, whatever it may be. So I have those insights. The front line can help me with the how to get there. And so putting those two together and setting up venues and councils to where you can test ideas and move fast and pivot if the idea doesn't work. So it's not just big pivots around like career moves. It's pivots around, I tried this and it didn't work. I'm going to pivot to a new model. And if I think back to my role at Amazon, I learned that better than anywhere else because they fail fast and it's expected. And it's not about disrupting, it's about transforming and doing that in a fast model. And so anyway, I just think that it's critical to be able to get those frontline voice of the customer and have them help you with your decisions. That's the way you're going to get support. Otherwise, you get resistance. No one wants to change, right? I don't want to change. You don't want to change. But if you are doing this with a goal in mind that you both kind of co-created, then you get better support.
Yeah. I mean, just challenge you a bit on the don't want to change, because I actually love change.
Well, that's good.
And I'm feeling that you like change, actually.
Well, okay, that's fair. If anybody that works in an emergency department, you have to like change, because every minute there's a change in who you're taking care of and what emergency is coming in the door. So I do thrive in change. So that's fair. I think most of the time when I see people resist change, it's because you need to back up and talk about the why, and you need to really make sure people understand it, because people do want things to work better and solve the problems, in my case, in healthcare, but in whatever business that they're in.
No, because if you do thrive on change, and I think people who thrive on change and embrace change are quite rare. Most people do not like change. I would agree with you on that. So as a leader, how do you get people to change and adapt and move to new systems, new processes? And, there's a huge one coming along for every industry at the moment, with everybody talking about AI, but nobody seemingly know quite how to deploy it yet. Everybody's figuring that out. But we've got a big period of change coming up over the next decade. What are the things you've learned over the years to get people to move, to get people to go forward with you?
Yeah, so change goes at the speed of trust. So you have to get trust with those that you're working with. And that goes with identifying the problem, identifying where you're going to go. So I always say, as my role is to set the vision, the pace, and the direction. The how is a whole lot of people that are contributing to that. But data is so important, and showing people the progress. And so I just break it down into small steps, but it all starts back with me getting out, building relationships, and making sure I'm informed, so that when I come forward with an idea around change, that it is something people also care about. You're not going to, so I think that you've got to be informed. You've got to partner with those that are experts in their area. And then you've got to keep people informed along the way, and align incentives as well. So I think it's a multi-pronged approach, but I go back to the foundation of all of it goes into trust. And, the first program that I launched that became a statewide telehealth program, before anybody even heard of AI, telehealth, whatever, there was no way to get paid for it. It all came around, innovation comes out of a necessity, right? So we're solving a real pain point. So I got people rallying, and it was a movement that we were all determined to actually push through and to spearhead. And we became, one of 2 centers of excellence in the country. I'm still probably, this program was something I'm most proud of in my career, but let me give you a good example of what I mean by getting trust. I remember going out to a small rural town to tell them, hey, good news, the big ivory tower in the capital city is going to bring you healthcare. And I remember this lady coming up to me, and she looked me dead in the eyes, and she said, you're going to be like everybody else. You're going to come in here with some grant funded program, coming in here to quote, fix us, and then you're going to leave. And we're going to be no better than we were before. Literally, she said that to me. It stopped me dead in my tracks. We built an amazing relationship. I even used her story when I was testifying to the United States Congress, when I was advocating for policy change, used her story. And so I said, you know what? I got to build trust. So I went in and we built a program that was solving a real pain point, and it's still running today. So I just go back to how important stopping, making sure people that it impacts understand the why, and that you don't disappear, that you come and push through the hard times. You make sure that you have the resilience and tenacity to get through it. And none of this is easy. We're skipping all the pain points around where everybody wants to give up along the journey because it gets hard or there's resistance. But I have to go back to, her name was Annie. I go back to Annie, her saying that to me. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be that person. We're going to make healthcare better in your community. And we did.
I meet so many leaders who think leaders is about telling people what to do as opposed to taking them with you. And you've learned somehow how to build a movement and get people to follow by actually understanding at the grassroots. Yeah, and maybe you didn't even realize you'd done it, but it's fierce impressive. And any hints and learnings as to how you've got to that point where you are really understanding issues and working them through, as opposed to coming in, looking at numbers and then going, we're going to do this, close that?
Yeah, I feel like I'm in the middle. Like I need to be able to translate the voice of the customer to the boardroom and
Yeah.
show the business and financial benefits of what I'm talking about. But then it's all rooted on something that actually matters to the customer. And the customer, in my case, is the patient. I think you have to do both. I don't think I had some big, bold idea that I was going to take on, this change. But I actually was listen to me. I was a Southerner, you in the U.S., so you can hear my accent, female, and I'm going against a system that had been like this forever, and in many cases is still this way. And so I knew I was going to have a momentum and a movement behind me. And I knew people from the front lines wanted it to be different. And so I can remember trying to change state laws at the very beginning just to be able to get reimbursed for or deliver healthcare through technology, telehealth. This was in the early 2000s, and no one was really doing it at a scale outside of the military. And so I remember saying, I'm going to have to go change the law. And we were writing bills to do so, and no one would take my meeting. And I'm like, well, this is terrible. They have no idea that we've been doing it under a pilot and a grant around the state. And we're changing laws like Annie that I told you about. So I started making phone calls to all the rural areas and the customers we had changed their lives, and the rural hospitals that had the support they finally needed, and the companies that were having healthier employees. I started calling them. I said, hey guys, I can't even get a meeting. They flooded the Capitol with calls and letters. And all of a sudden, people were ready to talk to me. And we went from not being able to get a meeting to a bill that passed unanimously in the state. We were the first state to have reimbursement for telehealth. And so that was not a me. That was I became the mouthpiece for the masses that were saying, don't take this away. Now, and I'm making this all a rose garden, and it ended with a happy story. There was lots of ups and downs through this, and lots of reporters and, pushback and whatever else. But that if I cut through the noise, that's exactly what we did. We had a problem, and the community got behind it, and I was the vehicle to take it to the next step.
Oh, well, congratulations to you. I mean, that's an amazing story, and you don't meet many people who change the law, and that must be personally very, very, very satisfied with that. We're sort of running out of time. I'm blown away by talking to you. The world needs more people like you, for sure. We always sort of end these on a bit of a fun fact, and yours is the sort of, I think you are the first person that's been on Pivot Points that's done a TEDx talk. And I'm sure there's lots of people would love to go on TEDx and know what it feels like to do a TEDx talk and the amount of prep you have to do to get on it. But I'd love you to just talk a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap.
Yeah, great. Well, that was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it was amazing opportunity. And it's not, you see these clips of these, 12 to 15 minute, and they're very strict about the time. But so it was phenomenal, intimidating. And, I just got up trying to tell a story, and I was still young in my career when I was doing this as well. I was at my first academic medical center. And so I was still learning my voice and getting comfortable on the stage. And so this was a good way to jump into the deep end. So it was amazing. That plus when I've, testified 3 or 4 times now to Senate and Congress in DC, all of those were really incredible opportunities and fun facts that most people don't know that I've done, but a part of the journey. So, if I was to look back and think about all of this, bold leadership is not about one pivot. We're talking about pivots. It's not about one pivot. It's about tenacity and to make the next right choice again and again and again. And all of a sudden that builds a momentum to have real change.
That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And I love your quote. I'm going to be using that one. Change is built through trust. That is genius. It's been a real pleasure having you on Pivot Points, and thank you so much for coming on.
Dave, thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Pivot Points. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more fascinating conversations with industry leaders in our previous episodes. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to know more about Brand Pi and how we deliver impact in the pivotal moments that matter to you, head over to brandpi.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.